I'm a forensic psychology student, and here are 5 cases that haunt me to this day. It was definitely hard to just pick 5, and these are just brief descriptions, but I picked these 5 cases because I think the criminals could have been stopped earlier, whether it be a lack of care in the investigation or someone covering for them. I also think the deviance in these crimes is crazy. We will never understand what these victims went through, which is why I think it's important to spread awareness on crimes like these to possibly help someone in the future. The first case is of 17-year-old Junko Furuta, a girl who rejected a popular boy at her school. The boy did not take well to this, and a group of him and 3 of his friends tricked her, kidnapped her, and eventually took her to one of the boy's parents' basements where they held her captive. They originally had told the parents that she was a girlfriend of one of the boys, but the parents eventually figured out what happened. However, when the police showed up at the house, the parents lied and covered for the boys because they were scared of gang ties that one of the boys had. And Junko Furuta went through 40 days of hell, as they call it. She was essayed, tortured, beaten, unimaginable things, you name it, they did it. And she went through those 40 days of hell and fought hard, and on the 40th day, her body gave out and she unfortunately passed away. The boys' identities were sealed at the time because they were minors. A journalist later unsealed them and leaked them, but they were also given short sentences, no more than 20 years because they were minors. And they were all eventually released and are living free to this day, which is crazy. The second case is the Toy Box Killer. David Parker Ray had kidnapped, assaulted, and ended the lives of an unknown number of women over many decades. He was oftentimes accompanied by his girlfriend Cindy Hendy, and sometimes even his own daughter, who would help him kidnap his victims. He was called the Toy Box Killer because he had a semi-trailer where he kept his victims in. It was escape-proofed, and inside was a makeshift gynecology chair and a number of items he used to torture and assault his victims. He also had about an hour-long pre-recorded audio tape that he would play for each of his victims. It is on YouTube if you wish to search it, but it is very gruesome. He would essentially explain to them why he kidnapped them, what he was going to do to them, and what happened if they didn't listen. He explained he found his victims by looking for young girls who looked pure, or if he couldn't find that, he would look for women who would be attracted to other women so that they would be pure. He explained that when he was tired of them, he was going to DRUG them and leave them somewhere where they had no recollection of what happened, and if they didn't listen or didn't obey, he would end their lives. One day, a girl escaped and ran to a neighbor's house. The cops were called and they searched his trailer. They obviously found all of the sick and twisted stuff inside. He even confessed to having at least 40 victims, but they found none of the bodies, so they couldn't charge him yet. Before he was about to have another interrogation, he had a heart attack and passed away, so he never got to face the repercussions of what he did. The third case is of Joseph Fritzl. Joseph Fritzl had an 18-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, and he one day lured her into their basement and then kept her captive there for 24 years. Joseph Fritzl was building this underground dungeon in his basement, getting approvals from city. People knew he was building it, but he kept its true purpose unbeknownst to the family and friends. He one day lured his daughter Elizabeth down there, put a wet rag over her face, and then she would not come back up for the next 24 years. He would write off her disappearance by writing letters to the family explaining that she had run away. He would tell police she had fallen into bad groups of friends. All these excuses, when in reality he was down there essaying her multiple times a day, tying her up, leaving her in darkness. Unimaginable for a daughter to go through by her own father. Joseph Fritzl had 7 kids with his daughter Elizabeth over those 24 years. 1 died shortly after childbirth, 3 were raised by Elizabeth in the basement, and the next 3 had mysteriously ended up on the Fritz's doorstep. He would write letters from Elizabeth explaining that the baby she couldn't take care of and that she was leaving them there, and the family would just take them in. One day, her 19-year-old daughter had gotten sick and needed to go to the hospital. Elizabeth begged her father to take her so that she could get well, and he took her. But the doctors took a look at her, thought that something was not right, and they begged for whoever her mother was to come forward and explain it away. Elizabeth saw the pleas on the news, and she begged Joseph to let her go so she could help her daughter. At this point, Joseph was having a hard time keeping his 2 families separate, of course, and so he planned that he was going to release her and explain away her whole disappearance and say that she had just come back. But when she got to the hospital, doctors did not believe it, and they pulled her into a separate room. And eventually she agreed to tell them everything if she could never see her father again. He was then sentenced to life in prison, and that's where he remains. The fourth case is the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez would end the lives of at least 14 people and brutally attack many others in LA. He would burglarize homes, violently assault the people inside, essay his victims. He even took a little 6-year-old girl once. The detectives weren't even sure if the cases were connected in the beginning. He used many different weapons, he had many different types of victims, but he did use the same caliber at many scenes, and he also left a shoe print at many of the scenes. All the shoe prints belonged to an Avia. They believed that it was a black Avia based off of descriptions of what he was wearing, and a black Avia in his size had one pair sent to LA. But again, they had no one to compare it to, so they were stuck. They did have their witness description, and someone with that witness description was stopped at a police stop with a stolen vehicle. He heard on the police radio them talking about his crimes, and he fled the scene. They eventually found in that car a card to a dentist's office. They went there, gave the description, and the man says, yeah, someone came in there matching that description. He'll probably be back because he has an impacted tooth. They try to set men up there to stake out the dentist's office, but the department says, you're going to waste money, he's not going to come back, they have to pull their men. They instead give the dentist an alarm system that should alert them if he comes back. Of course, the day he comes back, it malfunctions and it never alerts them. There are people that claim that they have seen him, claim that they know him. There's one man who knew him and he had talked about some of his crimes to him, but they had no way to find him. Now, eventually on one of his stolen vehicles, a fingerprint is lifted which matches him in the system on some petty crimes, and they know who they are looking for now. However, media eventually leaks his pictures, and at first they were afraid that he was going to run away, knowing they knew who he was. But a person in the community saw him and chased him, and a bunch of people beat him up until the police came. That's how he was arrested, and he was eventually sentenced to death, but he died in prison. The fifth case, the Jeffrey Dahmer case, a lot of you know already, so I won't go into too much detail, but I put this in here because he could have been stopped way earlier. The authorities had so many chances to investigate further and didn't, and when they didn't want to be homophobic, so they assumed that this 13-year-old boy in distress was his boyfriend. Come on. And just the deviance in what he did is crazy. He should have been stopped earlier. And those are 5 cases that haunt me as a forensic psychology student.